I hereby call to order the February 20th, 2025 public hearing of the City of Prescott Board of Adjustments. Board members present, please state present when I call your name. Thomas Davis.
Here.
Mary Fredrickson.
Here.
Miriam Halbrick.
Here.
Tom Hutchison.
I'm here.
And I'm Tony Teeters, chairman today. This is an open public hearing and is being recorded by the city. The proceedings are being televised by representatives of the public media. The public, local cable and/or radio stations may also rebroadcast. The number of board members present is 5, and it will require 4 votes for a majority. Members of the public are required to state their name for the record so that we may know who is speaking and be able to contact them at a later date as necessary. And please mute your electronic devices. Thank you. Mary, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Yeah. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have the minutes from January 16th Board of Adjustment meetings, which I would take a motion to approve.
Mr. Chairman, Tom Davis, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Mary Fredrickson, second.
Are there any comments?
I wasn't here with the flu, but reviewing the minutes, I think it was the right decision.
All right, those in favor?
Aye.
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 No opposed? 5-0 was the vote. First item, CUP 24007.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman, board members, Tammy DeWitt, City of Prescott, Community Planner. Can we get our presentation up? Thank you. The request is a conditional use permit to allow for a new 3-story, 77,886 square foot self-storage building in a business regional zoning district located off of Ranch Drive and adjacent to State Route 69. Here's the subject property. It is on Business Regional. It's on Ranch Drive, which has 2 hotels. There's 2 vacant buildings. Then we have the AM/PM at the very end. And then across the street, you have Lee Boulevard, the apartments, and the other structures for commercial businesses. And here's the subject, the imagery of the property. It is vacant. It's been vacant. And the proposal is allowed in a business regional zoning district with a conditional use permit. The intent of a conditional use permit is to make sure it's compatible with the surrounding area, and if there's any conditions that we can add to the project to make it more compatible or to address any concerns there may be. Here's the site plan of the property. It has been reviewed by all our reviewing agencies. It does meet all our requirements for parking and setbacks and lot coverage in the business regional district for this use. And here's the elevations that were proposed for this business. Here's pictures from the site. This is looking across across Ranch Drive. And this is looking up Ranch Drive to the other hotels. Self-storage facilities are one of the lowest impact buildings you could have. There's very little traffic, mostly once they're established. The only other business we usually compare it to is a cemetery. So this is also looking back towards, there's vacant buildings that are along that have been vacant for a while, and we have not had any proposed uses for those. and some other pictures of the property. Things that we look at when we review the criteria, this is considered infill development. There is infrastructure in Ranch Drive. There is no access onto State Route 69. It will be via Ranch Drive. It is consistent with the general plan. This is also located in a business corridor, and we'll review to make sure all the colors and everything meet the criteria for a commercial corridor overlay. And we did send notices out to all the property owners of record within 500 feet of the property, which exceeds the 300-foot requirement. We published notices in the paper. We have not received any public comments in regards to this CUP request. And there is one possible condition that we did mention in our staff report that could minimize any potential impact with the hotels being down the street, is maybe possibly limiting the hours of operation from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. And that's the only condition that we would recommend as part of if you decide to approve this conditional use permit. And that concludes my presentation. I'm free to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions?
Mary Frederickson, I do. Tammy, looking at the site, across the highway, I saw some terraforming going on a vacant lot that's across the highway from this. Did the notice go out to that property owner? Do we know what's going in on that spot across the highway?
No, we don't have any plans for that property at this time.
We don't mean in the city, but
Correct.
somebody has a plan for it because they've been terraforming it.
And they can do that without any proposed uses, but it was sent out to all the property. Hold on. That map, it did go across the highway to those property owners.
Okay, thank you.
You're
And is there a reason for the staff recommendation of the hours? It seems when I read through the packet that the business is not considering hours even as much as the conditional use that was recommended.
With the self-storage facilities, that's a condition we sometimes recommend just to make sure it does not impact the area. This is in a commercial area. There are no residences except for the townhomes to the south there, but there is a good buffer there between it. So with the hotel there, we never heard from them either if they had any concerns with it, but it's just something that we suggest that maybe you can add a condition. You don't have to. Usually they are open 24 hours. So,
Right,
nowadays.
but I guess in the packet, the business indicated that their business hours were within the suggested condition. So I didn't know if there was some sense that the city had that the business might, in some future time, expand to be 24/7. We don't have anything like that.
No.
Is the business,
The
someone from
applicants
the
are
business here?
Yeah.
Maybe they could clue us in.
Hi, my name is Tyler Bush. I'm with the William Warren Group, StoreQuest Self-Storage. So as you indicated, our typical hours of operation are Monday through Saturday, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., Sunday, 10 to 5 p.m. Correct.
And you don't envision a plan to change that to be 24/7?
We don't.
Okay. Would you have any objection if a condition was put on this CUP to limit you in the future to 7 to 9?
We would be open to that.
Okay, thank you.
Just, Mr. Chairman, Tom Davis, just a matter of clarification for you. It says typical hours of operation, and it says Sunday 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. So what we're saying is 7 days a week, the time frame. There's not a stipulation about Sunday, but are you committed to reduce hours on Sunday or?
It's a case by case determination we make. We have over 300 properties across the country, so it really depends on the submarket and things like that. I mean, in some of our really rural facilities, we're not even open on Sundays. But on this one, we would anticipate being open 7 days a week within those timeframes we stipulate.
Okay. Now, and for my second question is, pardon me, how is that controlled? Is there a person on site, the employee on site?
Yeah.
Oh.
There's a on-site manager.
Okay.
And then sometimes there's an assistant manager as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll entertain a
See if there's any public comment first.
public comment.
We have one speaker, Miss Mary Hinton.
Good morning. I'd like to disagree with a low traffic. I mean, has anyone done a traffic impact study? When you put up your exhibits, if you look at Ranch Road in that area, could we have that back, please? Okay, stop. The other one. Go back. Go back. Do you see the truck parked there? Now, I represent the homeowners at the Oaks at the Ranch. That street at some times is really taken down to one lane if there's any parking on that road. I believe that a storage facility, a storage unit would bring in moving trucks, small moving trucks, U-Haul trucks. There would be much heavier traffic on that road. We have our little community of 29 homes at Oaks at the Ranch. Behind us are the larger homes from the ranch. We all use that as an access to go to Walker Road, which would be heavily impacted. There is a Costco, there's a convenience store, and there are accidents at the intersection of Walker and Ranch Road, at Walker and the 69. When we go out to Lee Road, which is our other ingress and exit, the traffic, it's just a stop sign to get to Lee Boulevard and then to the 69. That would be heavily impacted. I do have to say, in the event of an emergency, while Oaks at the Ranch is not age specific, we do have many senior citizens. In the event of an emergency, it would be difficult to get in and out, and I am concerned with the traffic. If you look at Lee Road and the 69, there are accidents there. I don't think it's a good use of the land. Not only that, because of the vacant buildings at the end of Ranch Road by the convenience center, we are attracting vagrants. We've had damage to our exit gates from the vagrants. They use our electricity, which is not a big deal, but repairing the gate structures is an expense. The vagrants aren't going away. I have a tendency to believe, from having seen other storage facilities and myself having to use a storage facility, that yes, it does attract homeless, regardless of what you might think and the fact that there are gates to the facility. I hate to say this, but a lot of homeless people do store their items in this type of facility and then hang around the area. The community, our community doesn't need that. And the homes behind us, there are a number of homes on the ranch that it just would really be a very poor service for. I'm afraid of fire. I'm afraid of campfires in the creek that goes through our community. And I really would like to state I oppose this facility. And I am speaking for the 29 homeowners at Oaks at the Ranch. Do you have any questions?
Thank you very much.
Will you please consider this and please do a traffic impact study? Because if you look at the road, people from, the hotels that are moving to Prescott park their U-Hauls out in the street, utility workers that are staying at the hotels that come up from Phoenix park on the street, and it does take it sometimes down to one lane. Thank you.
Chair, I have a question. I don't know if this is so much for Tammy or for the applicant. I don't remember looking at the site plan, whether it includes parking lot space or space for people moving in with a moving van or a U-Haul to pull in, that they would not be on the street. Tammy, maybe you.
I believe on look at it works. This area, I believe, is for the loading and unloading for U-Haul trucks. It looks like. Yeah, so this area here that's darkened on the site plan, that's where trucks can pull in and unload and load, and they won't back to other parking spaces.
But they would still have to use Ranch Road to get there. And the fact that, I mean, when they pull out, if they park on the street, I mean, just because there is an area to load and unload doesn't mean that's what they're going to do. They wouldn't necessarily be unloading from Ranch Road. They'd be unloading and then possibly pulling out parking and staying in one of the hotels.
Thank you for your input. Thank you, Tammy.
Tammy,
To also add that in the event of a fire or an emergency, we do have residents that are 97 years old, that are in their late 80s, that would have to walk out because of the traffic impact. And not only for us, but for the homes behind us. You notice people 500 feet out, but all the homes up on the hill, the ranch, we all use those roads, Walker Road and Lee Boulevard, and they would be impacted by the traffic. People going to visit their storage units and moving in and out. I mean, you just don't move in and leave it. People go to look through their stuff.
Tammy, Tom Hutchison, based on the city's experience, how would you rate the traffic that a storage unit generates? Would it be low, medium, high?
Very low.
I disagree. I totally disagree. Could you do an impact study?
Did we?
It's not required because it does not generate enough traffic. That's just, these type of facilities don't generate traffic that requires an impact study.
I disagree with that.
Chair, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, just a little bit of extra information, and I apologize for stepping on Tammy's toes. She's got this in hand, but the traffic engineering community across the country uses standards that are based on types of uses that figure out how much traffic are generated by different types of businesses. They're averages, so certain businesses are higher and certain businesses are lower. We use those averages that are countrywide through our traffic engineering department when we do reviews of projects that are proposed. And this project was looked at by our traffic engineering staff and didn't trigger the requirements for a traffic impact analysis because typically this type of use has a large volume of traffic only at the beginning when they're loading up initially, when they first open, when people are first putting materials in. And then it's a slow trickle of traffic throughout the week, throughout the day, of people coming and going from facilities. These types of facilities generally don't have the kinds of impacts that a retail facility would have, where you have a lot of traffic that comes in all day long on a rotating basis. These are intermittent visits. People drop things off, they go and pick them back up again, but it's not something where there's a constant flow. As far as the concerns about parking on the streets, unless the street is narrow enough where there could be an impediment to fire department access, we generally allow for street parking in the city of Prescott. That street parking is monitored, and if it gets to a point where vehicles parking on a street will inhibit emergency vehicle access, typically our street department, again, that's part of our traffic engineering department, will post one side or the other of a street as no parking to ensure there's sufficient lane width for emergency vehicle access. So just a reassurance, this was looked at by our traffic engineering department as part of the typical review. All of our departments looked at it. It meets city code requirements. The question is, do you apply conditions to this that would perhaps improve its balance with the community around it, a commercial community around it? The adjacent properties and the properties nearby are mostly commercial. The zoning is commercial. A commercial use is going to end up here, whether it's a low-impact storage facility or a high-impact retail facility. That's something that's likely to happen at the facilities. So again, I apologize to Tammy for stepping in. It's just I think we need to understand that none of this just flies through. It gets a very thorough review by city staff, and we have a very professional city staff here. Thank you.
Thank you, George.
If, Chair, if you feel we're at a point where we can entertain a motion, I will make a motion to approve CUP 24-007 with the condition that the staff recommended, that is to limit current or future hours of operation 7 days a week, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Tom Hutchison, I'll second.
Any other comments? Signify by aye. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Passes 5-0. Okay, you're on.
The next request is V 25001. The request before you is a variance to Article 3, Section 3.4.3, Single Family 18 Minimum Setbacks of the Land Development Code to allow a reduction in the required 15-foot rear yard setback by 10 feet to allow for a rear setback of 5 feet to accommodate the construction of a covered patio. Here's the subject property. It is located in the Hidden Valley Ranch subdivision. It was platted as a planned area development, which allowed for flexibility in the lot sizes and setbacks. As you can see, we have a variety of single-family residences, townhomes in the area. Some townhomes have 0 setbacks. So these were platted due to the terrain and topography of the area to allow for flexibility in the setbacks. For this property in particular, per the plat, it has a 15-foot rear setback. Here's imagery of the property. It was set back as far as it could go because of the front of the property are boulders. So they set it back as far as the house could go. Here's the site plan of the property, and I apologize, we're working with her to get this before you. So the site plan, this is the area in question to allow for a covered patio through here. This was reviewed back in December 2019. It allowed for an 8-foot setback for the covered patio. And I believe the applicant she thought she was going to need the 5.5 feet, but I believe, and I'll defer to her, that she's okay with the 8-foot that was previously approved. So that's something that she can clarify as she comes up, which is fine because it's a less of an encroachment than what was advertised. So you can approve for a different setback as long as we're not encroaching further in. So here's the property, the area in question. As you can see the house, we have a covered patio, and the little string there is the property line. And here's another view coming out. The applicant stated in her request, the reason for this is that this is the secondary access out of the house, and that when it snows, she has trouble trying to keep it clear and for emergency purposes. And then here's another view of the patio. This is the front of the property. As you can see, it's pretty heavily bouldered, so the house was set back as far as it could go to accommodate for the terrain. This was reviewed for all these conditions, that does meet the criteria for a variance. And we did have a similar request approved in 2019 for an 8-foot. Variances are only valid for 12 months unless they ask for an extension or they apply for a permit, which wasn't done, so we had to come back, bring this back before you again. We did send proper notices to all the property owners within 300 feet and posted the property. And we did not receive any public comment. We did receive one letter in your packet from the neighbor in the back behind this property with concerns about property values and fire concerns. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm free to answer any questions. And the applicant, I'm sure, would be able to address the change in the setback request.
Thank you, Tammy. Any questions?
Of course. Mary Frederickson. Tammy, I guess I got lost in your presentation just there. Did you say that the applicant is open to changing this variance request to go back to what was requested earlier?
Yes.
Thank you. Because that was going to be one of my questions, why the change from last variance request to this one, but she's up for moving back to the earlier request.
She thought she was going to have to make the patio cover bigger, so hence the further encroachment. But after talking to her builder to help her kind of look at the site again, they concluded that what they had before was what she needed, and so the 8-foot would work.
Thank you. And Tammy, I don't know if this is a question to you or to the applicant. Is that stepping back to the earlier variance request, does that mean the roof of the patio cover is going to be at the same footprint as the concrete pad right now?
I'll defer to the applicant.
Come on up, thanks.
J.D. Greenberg. I want to first and foremost thank the City of Prescott and the Community Development Department for the education that I have acquired over the past few years. I feel like I'm going to get a degree in setbacks and allowances and whatever. The reason that I had requested a bit of a change, and again, I still am having trouble figuring what setbacks are, although I now know that technically they're measured from the property line and not the house, and but beyond that, I get rather confused, because unless I can actually see it, I get confused. Initially, in 2019, there was a 6-inch difference in the actual depth of the patio versus what was submitted. And for want of 6 inches, I have been struggling for months now trying to figure out how I could get my actual concrete covered and protected. Well, I also have a hip roof, which complicates things even more. And also, as a side note, I think I saw you out taking the pictures, and if I had known you were coming, I would have gotten it to look a little bit better on my patio, which also will be a benefit to my neighbor, because he won't have to look at things I have covered out there. But at any rate, I've since learned that that extra 6 inches by trying to get the posts out 10.5 feet versus 10 feet or 12 feet, by going to an odd measurement, it would have cost me much more money and complicated the building supplies. So this is part of, and I just learned this after an hour meeting with my designer last week. So the reality is that I figured out that I wanted to just keep things simple. And everyone was in agreement the last time in 2019, and my neighbor had no objections to my plans at that time, so I thought, why just go simple? So that's why I changed it to just duplicate what had already been approved in 2019. And I learned another lesson: always read to the bottom of the letters, because I just was so excited that it got approved in 2019, and it was at the holidays, and then COVID hit and everything else, and I hadn't read down to the bottom to see that there was a 1-year limit on variances. So expensive lesson learned. I also just wanted to ask, is it critical that my name is misspelled on this?
No.
Okay. It's Greenberg with an E instead of a U, and I sure as heck would hate to have a legal, problem with that spelling error. So basically, I'm just requesting an 8-foot setback in the variance. The roof will come out. It will just be short of the depth of the patio.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Tom Hutchison. Tammy is the impacted neighbor in the audience.
I don't know.
I don't see.
I'm sensitive to setbacks, but and the idea being that if the neighbor has living space and actually hangs out 5 feet away from your patio, that's one thing. But if in fact what I saw in the drawing was that area of his property isn't even near this.
Exactly. His house is probably, I almost should have measured it, but I would guess that his actual house is almost 20 feet away, 30 feet, maybe 50 feet. The only thing that is up right in front of my patio is that it was going to be a turnaround for his parking. And what he does now is that he parks his truck every day, I would guess no more than 15, 20 feet up above, looking down on my patio. So an extra bonus to me, in addition to the safety issue, is that it would give me more privacy because of the truck. And
So-
it's just up from the where the little blue sign is. If you go up another probably 10, at most 15 feet, and then go over, he has a raised patio, raised parking area.
So in your sense, if this is approved, are you antagonizing your neighbor, or is he okay with pretty much what you're asking for?
When he had actually attended the Board of Adjustment hearing, along with another previous neighbor in December of 2019, the other neighbor, Mark Friedstrom, who is an architect, had asked a couple of questions. Jeff Phillips made no comment at all during that time and raised no complaints at that time. And the situation has not changed at all since then. And actually, just where the rope is, I am there are a couple of plants there, and I'm taking them out and moving the boulders back against the property line, which will give more clearing distance I am a very fire-wise advocate. In fact, when I bought the house, I had the hotshot crew was actually the ones who came out and did my fire-wise assessment, which was really very special. But it had been over 20 years, so I actually had the city fire-wise assessor, I don't know what his actual title is, come out within the past 6 months to look at any things that might have grown up or changes, and he saw no problem with this area in the back.
Yeah, I'm trying to get a sense of, we're not creating a Hatfields versus the McCoys feud here.
I'd rather not comment on that. He raised the issue of the fire-wise. I trim my trees. I have no control over what he does with his trees that are back 15 feet.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other-
So, Mr. Chairman, just a question. Tammy, can you bring up what would be the recommendation for, so looking at that, the bottom line here is, just for clarification for everybody, is if we change that 5 foot to 8 foot,
Correct.
that's okay, and that's what was the previously approved, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Everything is as it was previously approved at this point, yes.
Thank you. I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, Tom Davis, I'll move to approve V25-001 to reduce the rear yard setback to 8 feet to allow the addition of a covered patio to the house in conformance with the site plan.
And that would include do I need to include, no, so exactly as it was before. So thank you.
Do I have a second?
Miriam Hawbrick, I second.
With no further comments, please indicate if, with an aye.
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 Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Let's move to V24011.
So you're the City of Prescott Community Planner, Tammy DeWitt. Thank you, Chairman, members of the board. This request is a variance to Article 3, Section 3.6.3.f, SF9 minimum setbacks of the Land Development Code to allow reduction of the required 25-foot front setback by 10 feet to allow for a 15-foot front setback for a new detached garage on a 0.4 acre parcel. This one's kind of a similar situation as the last one. This one was approved in 2022 to allow for a 14-foot 3-inch setback for a new garage. They did apply for a permit, but then withdrew it, and then the 12 months had passed, so then the variance is no longer valid. So here we are again for the similar request. There is already a detached garage on the property, and the applicant states that that will be removed, and the new garage will be in line with the house. As you can see, the house is kind of angled, and the new garage will be angled with it, which requires the encroachment. Here's the setback. This is pretty much, the garage is a little different than the one before, but it is the same setback request that's being requested. And it is, like I said, in line with the house, so it looks more uniform than having it offset. Here's the proposed garage. I did get an email yesterday from one of the neighbors asking about the garage, if it would impact their view, and I sent them the drawings and the site plan, and they had no concerns. This is the existing garage to be removed. And then here's another view to kind of see how it would be angled. The area that the new garage would go. And here's another view from the front of the house. This was reviewed for our review criteria. There were no issues or concerns in regards to the request. Like I said, other variances have been approved in the neighborhood, and this was a similar that was approved in 2022. We did send out mailings and posted the property, and we did not receive any comments from regards to this variance request. I could talk today. And that concludes my presentation. I'm free to answer any questions.
Are the requesters here? Name.
Brian Rowley.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions from the board?
Yeah, Tom Hutchison. What's your rationale for wanting to do this?
For the setback or for building the garage?
For attaching the garage. You've got a garage. What's behind wanting to do this new garage?
So part of the issue is that we have some mature trees in the next to the road there that are right in front of the garage that we have today. And so it's a little difficult to get through those. We don't want to bring down the trees. We'd rather keep the trees, so this other angle makes it much easier to get into the garage. The other reason is that, as you can see, I need a place for some cars. There's one right there that's just sitting out, and so it'll be a little bigger garage than we have today, and a shop and things that we use. So,
thank you.
No further comments?
Mr. Chairman, Tom Davis, just a question for staff. So this was something like this was approved previously, just like the last one. And so, just out of curiosity, it has nothing to do with the application per se, is there a provision for extending a variance approval?
Yes, so
So-
they can ask for an extension, which we can bring in front of the Board of Adjustment. So they either can apply for a permit, which they did. They applied for a permit, but then they withdrew it, and then the time frame lapsed. So here we are again, similar to the last one. It's been over 12 months, but they could have applied asked for an extension. We would bring that before the Board of Adjustments to grant extensions. That's in the code to allow.
Without any further questions, I would take a motion.
Yeah, Tom Hutchison here. I move to approve V24011 as applied for.
Mary Frederickson, second.
Okay, we'll have the vote. All in favor, signify by aye.
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 Opposed, nay. 5-0. Now we'll go to V24010.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a request for variance for building heights, and it is a request that is associated with the steep topography of the property. And I'll go through that in the presentation for you. So the location is 1558 Standing Eagle. This is in a central part of Prescott, but it is an area with challenging topography. If you've ever been in the area, it's south of Rosser Street, north of the reservation, and that area tends to have a lot of valleys that run through it, typically north-south valleys that parallel the streets, and you'll see that again in just a moment. So the request is to allow for residential building height, typically 35 feet maximum allowance, to go to 43 feet with this particular residence, again, given the topography of the site. The blue line at the bottom of the map is actually the northern boundary of the Yavapai Prescott Indian Reservation. North of that, the subdivision goes on upwards to the north to Rosser Street. The topography in the area, again, tends to run north-south, so you have a lot of slopes in the front or backyards of property as you move through this particular neighborhood. Just to give you a little bit better view of it, it's a little hard to tell the topography here. You'll see that on the elevation drawings when I get to those in just a moment. The building will require some grading in order to create a flat pad to put the structure on. There are some limitations on how much of the site can be graded in this area due to the hillside standards that apply to those steeper lots. So the pad area, the white area around the building footprint, is the maximum area that could be graded as far as the site goes. So shifting the house around on the site is somewhat limited by that, as well as the building setbacks, which affect primarily the front of the property. When looking at a piece, so this is looking north through the proposed house and property. When dealing with a house on steep slopes, there are two ways you can address the height of the house. One is to flatten the roof a little bit so you have less steepness to the roof. The other is to shift the house forward or backward on the lot to get closer or further from the street in order to reach an area that is more level. In this particular case, the applicants have designed a house that matches many of the other houses in the neighborhood, so flattening the roof was not a priority for them. Being able to shift the house forward or backward, forward works if you shift it towards the street, because that would allow for a flatter area and a little bit shorter house, but you run into the building setback, front yard setback, and that stops the building from being shifted forward. So they're left with the dilemma of asking for a reduced front yard setback or an additional 7 feet of height to the building. 8 feet of height to the building. In this particular case, setback variances to front setbacks very often, I'm going to see if I can go backwards here, very often shorten the driveway to the point where it becomes an issue of vehicles not being able to pull fully into the driveway without overhanging the curb. So front setback variances are something that city staff generally discourages if there are other options. Again, which is why we're here today for a height rather than shortening that front setback. We believe there's less safety impacts with a height variance than there are with a front setback variance. Again, in this particular case, the way we measure building heights is to look at the natural grade of the site, not the finished grade of the site with the pads cut in for the various portions of the building. What that does is let us look at the overall property in relation to any adjacent property. So there's a common point of measurement for all of the properties in a neighborhood. In this particular case, the measurements from the natural grade, which are, I'm going to see if I can do what Tammy did. Aha. So the natural grade is, that line on the site. You can see it's rather steep. The site will have to have some cut and fill in order to create the building pads, but the measurement of building height is actually going to be well below the finished grade down to the point where natural grade is measured from. And as a result of that, the building height at the highest point through the building, as if you were slicing a cake through the building, at the highest point is 43 feet. So an 8-foot variance is necessary. That's what's before you today. A view from the other direction, so now you're facing south. One of the things that we look for is whether or not there's a way to reduce the height of the building by increasing the steepness of the driveway, but there are limitations on driveway steepness as well under our code. Our fire and safety codes have a limitation on the steepness of a driveway, which I believe is a maximum of 18%. This is assuming an 18% steepness to the driveway. And the reason for that is primarily so that emergency services can actually get someone out of a house and up to the street to a rescue situation, an ambulance situation, for instance. So they, again, another thing they had to deal with was the maximum steepness of the driveway. You have had a number of building height requests in the past through the variance processes. You've had a number of them point to that fire and safety requirement of driveway steepness as a reason why they had to apply for variance. These guys are in similar situation. Several of the nearby homes have a similar design. You can see this had a flat pad. This one, because of the shape of the roof, does meet the building height requirements. Again, another one in nearby up the street a little ways, again, because of the shape of the roof, met the height requirements, but the same situation applies. The property is very steep. These are good examples of the type of terrain that this property owner is working with. In going through the process of review at the staff level and for you in your staff report, we've looked at all of these conditions, the requirements, the conditions, specifically the substantial detriment to nearby property owners. That's one that's often a high priority for us. We don't want to offer a variance opportunity if it's going to damage a neighbor's view or damage a neighbor's property value. We also look at self-induced hardship and whether the hardship is created by the applicant. So you'll note in the staff report that we've answered each of these for you based on staff's position on the matter. That's obviously something that you can look at as part of your presentation or part of your discussion. We believe that they've met all of these requirements to a degree that would allow for you to grant a variance should you choose to do so. We did do neighborhood outreach. Mailed notices were sent out approximately 300 feet in all directions from the property, which is typical unless we have something that's very unusual. In this case, we did not receive any comments from neighbors within that 300 feet in opposition or in favor of this particular project. And we recommend typical recommendation, approval, or denial. In this particular case, staff's position as presented to you in the staff report supports the 43 feet, again, should you choose to grant a variance. We do have an applicant here. Mr. Tom Terry is the architect who can speak to this. And with that, I'm conclude my presentation.
George, are there other buildings there that we've approved height?
Not in the immediate vicinity, but within the same neighborhood, yes.
Thank you.
Chair, I have a question for George. Going through the list of criteria, the element of a self-induced hardship, from the staff's perspective, they don't include the design as being self-induced. That is, the examples of other homes in the area, all, at least the ones that were presented here, meet the 35 feet because they designed a home with a flatter roof. So the fact that this applicant designed a home with a peaked roof that took them above the limit, is that from the staff's perspective not considered a self-induced hardship?
In our review, we looked at the roof designs of this house, but we also looked at some of the nearby properties. And I apologize, I did not get any of the nearest houses in photographs. There are several others with that similar type of roof pitch in the area. The neighbor wanting to have something that more or less meets the HOA's approval was the other part of this. So we felt like because of the other properties nearby and the HOA approval of this design that they probably met that requirement.
But the other properties that you're referring to that have the peaked roof, did they exceed the 35 feet?
None of them that I'm aware of more than 1 or 2 feet. A reminder of our processes for deviation from codes. There's 2 ways you can get a variance. If it's a very small variance, 10% or less of a requirement can be granted administratively. So we often grant 3.5-foot height variations at the staff level to properties to try to address circumstances like this. It's only if it goes beyond that 10% do we bring them to you through the variance process, and that's written into the land development code.
And I don't know if this will be to you, George, or maybe to the applicant if they're here. You mentioned the HOA approval. The letter that was included in the package talked about approving a landscape modification, but really didn't talk about the house design or the height. So I don't know if maybe the HOA, there's a separate approval of that element of it.
Tom Terry, Distinctive Homes and Architecture. So, yes, we also have a HOA approval that I intended to submit the approval letter to you. So it was approved, and the committee wants houses similar design to other neighborhoods, and they require a tile roof, and so a tile roof requires a little steeper roof. So this house is approved by the committee, and we're hoping for a variance request would be reasonable. So any other questions?
I'm sorry, the HOA then indicated
Has
approval
approved it, yes.
of the height and the design of the roof?
Yes, what we've done is invested a substantial amount of money to improve the pad, to create the pad there so that the visible height when it's done is only 35 feet, but we had to, import a lot of fill to do that. So they were in favor of that and have approved that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions? No further public comment?
Hello, Pat Fuge. I'm a tentative board member of the HOA in Estancia de Prescott. George, the house that did have the approval was right behind me. It was in your picture. It had the board approved it 5 months ago. That house, the one that got approved, is right next to it, and it did get an approval for a steeper pitch, but a little shallower than what's being considered today. I just had one question, and maybe the gentleman with the design committee can answer. From the front view on the street, is the pitch, what's the maximum height when you're standing on the street? Not from the sides.
If you're looking directly at the house from the street, I did not include a picture of that in the presentation, but the height is approximately 25 feet from the street.
And because there's no other houses on either side and behind the house, it's quite high. big pad, so there's no effect there. So I just wonder what the visual appearance would be like from the front, and that answers my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Tom Davis, George, while, we've had several of these because of the fire code change mostly, and the access, and I'm wondering, is it time to rethink the way the maximum height is measured, especially on these downhill lots? Because of the change in the code and the access slope. Because in the I think the previous unit in Hacienda Village had a similar situation.
Yes.
And my thing is, I'm troubled by the extent of like somewhere in the 8 to 10, 6, 8, 10 variance area of height is and to me is kind of really outside the big envelope.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so I'm just saying that, especially from the street standpoint, it's not that high of a building, right? And similar was with the Hacienda Village case, we're going to probably there's vacant lots on each side of this property.
It's likely you'll see a variance
it's likely
request
we
for
will see
those
this again.
adjacent.
And so I'm wondering if the proper way to analyze these is from the height of the street and a lower limit and from the height of the street, and not have to go through the variance steps that usually are required.
A couple of points in that. First of all, we are contemplating, I'm saying we, but I've managed to make sure it's after I retire. We are contemplating a thorough review of the land development code with some adjustments being made to various parts of it. And as most of you know, most of the flat parts of Prescott have been built. What's left are sloped areas, sometimes sloped to the point where the average person looking at it can't see how a house would be built there, but you have a situation like this occur. So that may be something that gets addressed through that land development code review and update that's going to occur over probably the next year or so. The other issue to keep in mind is, well, there's actually two. Other issues to keep in mind are that if the deviation from the standard in height is less than 10%, you don't see it. We don't issue a lot of those. So typically what happens is there needs to be an egregious situation for something to have to come before the Board of Adjustment. You don't get a lot of these. Height variation on design of houses is not the most common thing you have in front of you. It is one, but setbacks are far more common for you to deal with. So while we have issues with the way we measure height on these very steep slopes, it's not such a common issue that it's like the highest priority that we deal with. In this particular circumstance, it's certainly appropriate to relook at it because of what we have going on, particularly in the neighborhoods that are now building out, that are steep sloped, because again, the flat parts of Prescott have been built on. So we're looking at that. That will be Chelsea's job back there. And Tammy's job. And I apologize, they both just aged 5 years. One of the things, though, to keep in mind is the frequency of these appearing before you really isn't very high. So we try to make sure that they meet code requirements before they end up in front of you.
I just want to
possible.
thank you for the response that staff is looking at it. That's all I'm really concerned about. Okay.
Absolutely.
I will entertain a motion.
Mary Frederickson, I'll move to approve variance V 24-010 as presented.
Miriam Haubrick, I will second that.
Signify by saying aye for approval.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. We will move to V 23018.
while they're bringing this one up, Mr. Chairman, this is a request for fence height variance for a property to allow for a 6-foot fence to encroach into the front yard setback of a property where our code requirement is a maximum of 4 feet for a fence height. So we'll walk through this, similar to the one you just had. This is at 908 Aubrey Lane. That is the request. So the section 3.6 is the zoning district. Section 6.4 are standard design requirements for fencing. The fencing area says 6-foot fence from the front setback back on the lot on residential properties. From the front setback forward on the lot, the max is 4 feet. So that requirement is typical, and you see that all over town. In this particular case, the property in question is near Whipple Street, and Whipple Street is a rather busy road. And the applicant's request is for the 6-foot fence to help provide some privacy, maybe some noise mitigation as well, for their home because of the noise impact from Whipple Street. They listed a few other things. You have their answers to our variance questions as part of the staff report, but primarily it seems to be a privacy issue in relation to Whipple. Just to give you an idea of what's around the property, there is some zoning to the west that is commercial. The property in question is in a residential neighborhood, and the zoning is residential. And you can see Whipple Street through the middle of that photograph. A little bit zoomed in to give you a little better idea. This property is not at the corner, so it's inset one property from the corner. And I'll show you a photograph or two of the two properties that are at the corner. The 6-foot fence in the front yard requirement as part of our code is primarily to allow for visibility and to avoid having a situation where the front yard feels like the alley on residential properties where you do have a narrow travel way and a lot of fencing or walls along them. Air and openness is part of the process that zoning looks at when it comes to fencing on properties. We don't encourage high fences in front yards for that reason. Again, because of our code language, though, the max height is 4 feet. In this particular case, the drawing that was submitted indicates 28 feet from the house to the curb. The actual property line's inset a few more feet. The actual distance that they're asking to have the 6-foot fence encroach is about 20 feet. Let me try this again. Okay. So the fence actually runs along this property line down to what is effectively the property line, and it's adjacent to the end of a sidewalk, and you'll see that in a couple of photographs that I'll show you. Back one, just to point this out, the request does not include fencing along the front property line. So they're not proposing a 6-foot fence along here. The fence is only on this section of the sideline, but it's within the front setback. A curiosity of our setbacks are that the front yard runs from side property line to side property line, and whatever's left in between is considered a side. So in this particular case, it's a front setback. Just to give you another view of the property. This is a view from the street, and this is a Google Street View. I went out there to try to take photos and realized my life was in danger. So in this case, Google has done some of the work for me. As you can see, the adjacent properties at each of the corners, oh, I think I lost my pointer thing in there. Nope, there it goes. These corner properties have walls, and these walls meet our setback requirements. So that 4-foot section is within the front setback, and that 4-foot section is within the front setback. As the fence goes higher, it's because it's in line with the face of the house and a side yard at that point. So while the applicant is requesting a fence to exceed those heights. The properties closest to the street did not at the time ask for that. The property in question is this property. At the time this photo was taken, the fence actually extended into the right-of-way, and that's been removed. So we don't allow fences in the right-of-way unless we put them in, and that was corrected by the applicant. Just to give you a view of the fence from different directions, this view is facing south. The fence is the white fence here, and again here. The property line itself is just behind the front face of the truck, approximately where the wheel line is, and again here, approximately right there. So the fence goes all the way to the property line, but again does not extend into the right-of-way, and the question of the variance is the height. There is a property across the street from this one that has non-conforming fences. We could not find any fence permits for them, so that property owner will be noticed of their violation and required to fix their situation as well, or obtain a variance of those for the fence height. So this is a view looking north of that same fence, so white on one side, brown on the other side. We went through the review criteria. Self-induced hardship is one we have a little concern about because the fence was installed. Had the applicant come through this process with you prior to installation of the fence, we believe that you could take into consideration the hardships created by proximity to the busy street. So we allowed this to move forward because of that. They do have an argument that that nearby street generates a lot of noise and traffic and light. So again, we move this forward to you for consideration. And we noticed properties within 300 feet again, typical of residential unless there's something truly unusual about it. No comments received regarding this request from any of the folks noticed within this radius. Variance request, typical motion. We do have the applicant here who can answer specific questions should you have them, and I'm open to answer any questions you have for me.
George, I think what I just heard you say was the applicant wants 6 foot, but really doesn't need 6 foot.
I'm not sure I said that. What I said was that there are other properties nearby with potentially worse circumstances that comply with code. Again, looking at these properties at the corner who are more impacted by traffic and street noise, they meet the code requirements. So there's a balance that you may need to take in looking at these two owners who meet the code requirement and the applicant who is requesting a higher fence for privacy.
So again, remind me, what was the rationale for wanting this 6 foot fence?
I would defer to the applicant to explain that.
Alyssa Minio. I'm one of the homeowners. This is my husband, Ronnie Minio, and obviously our son, Stetson. So I agree with George. Obviously, the two houses that are closest to the road should want a higher fence, in my opinion, with the noise that we have at Whipple. And not only the noise, bigger than the noise of Whipple and the traffic is the pedestrians that we have coming from that road. We've had multiple instances, specifically the house that you see to the left of the screen is our elderly neighbor. Just probably 3 weeks ago, she was texting and calling us asking if we saw the man that ran through her front yard that then deterred to the street in front of our house because our fence pushed him out there. We've got a lot of pedestrian traffic from the rehabilitation homes across the street, the Maverick that's just right there. We actually do have letters from both of those homeowners right there, plus additional homeowners on Audrey Lane that say they have no concerns with the fence. I know the elderly woman that is next door to us, she would love to have a higher fence. She just hasn't had the time or the resources to be able to do that. But our rationale is truly, as George mentioned, the Vehicle traffic on Whipple is noisy and it's a lot, but even more so than that, we're growing our family. We spend a lot of time in our front yard just to have that little bit more of additional privacy and security from a lot of traffic that comes up that road from Whipple, from the rehabilitation homes across the street is a benefit for us, and to be able to feel a little bit more safe and secure to spend time in our front yard.
Thank you.
So noise abatement is a key issue.
Noise is, but like I said, it's definitely a lot of it is pedestrian as well. We have a lot of pedestrian traffic up that road, and I could go into multiple anecdotal scenarios of crime and different things. You know, we've had officers chasing people up our road that got out of a car on Whipple right there, and that's where they exited. So it just gives us a little bit more security when we're right in town. Obviously, Prescott is for the most part a safe town, and we love this town, but there is, when you get right into the center of town, there is activity that goes on. So the more security we feel like we can give our family, the better. So.
Mary Frederickson, just a comment there about the safety issue for pedestrians or people running through the yard.
Yeah.
I guess I'm not quite capturing how a 4-foot fence doesn't stop somebody from running through your front yard any more than a 6-foot fence, or I guess the other direction. How a 6-foot fence stops somebody more than a 4-foot fence.
A 4-foot stump would probably stop me, but not somebody more or less my husband's height. And just like I said, it was probably 3 weeks ago. The house right next door to us that's shown in this picture is an elderly woman who said that she literally, and somebody hopped over her 4-foot fence that you can see in that picture and ran through her front yard, and then she saw them get kicked to the street because of our higher fence. So she was asking if we had seen, who that was, if we had saw what happened. We didn't at the time. But that is just one example of kind of the incidents that we see on our road.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Any other public comment? I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, this is Tom Davis. One of the things sways me on this argument is the sound. And I think sound attenuation on Whipple particularly is probably a big issue. And going down the street, the rest of the neighbors, I'm not so sure it's justified, okay? So I'm not convinced of that, but I'm going to recommend approval of this variance request. And I don't have the wording, but move to approve V23-018 for a 6-foot fence within the front building setback.
Do I have a second? Okay, please indicate your vote with an aye. Those voting to approve.
Sorry, do we need to vote since we do not have a second?
Who? Did someone second? Okay. We need a second.
Is there a second to the motion to approve?
Would more letters from our neighbors help? We've got, I think, about 6 or 7, including the ones surrounding us.
Okay, I will second that motion.
Okay.
All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Was that 3? Was it
3. Yeah, the motion failed.
The motion fails. So,
is there an alternative motion, or you're not required to make an alternative motion, but you have an option to?
any of the members have a proposal for an option?
Question for George about that.
Yes, sir.
I mean, George, with a Sawzall, taking the 6 down to 4 fixes the problem. Is that correct?
It would bring the fence into compliance with the code as it's written. Yeah, again, because of the 4-foot maximum height. If it were reduced to 4 feet, it would meet the code requirement.
Thank you.
And I guess just for process, so am I hearing it correctly that a motion to deny isn't required because failure of the motion to approve was not successful. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. Sorry, Matt.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
If there's something I could add
Sure.
to this, we've been sitting here for the last hour, and we haven't heard one nay for any, 3-story storage facilities, everything that we've heard, and for us to hear nays now seems a little odd to us. You know, we have letters from all of the neighbors that surround this that are approving it. And so it's concerning to us that this board of 5 adjusters can overrule what the people that have to live next to this and see this fence and drive by it every single day have to say. It doesn't seem right to us. This is our family, this is where we live. We almost feel duped standing here.
Well, I'm sorry you feel that way, but, you know, in other meetings, we have nays frequently also, so this is not an unusual thing.
Well,
and why each member voted the way that they did, that's for them to know.
this has been a long process, and we're just hoping that there isn't decisions being made out of spite for this situation. Again, for you to overrule the opinion of the people, more than 5 people that live on the street, is a huge concern to us, and we'll have to appeal this and keep it going, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Tom Davis, George, would it be advisable to, is it possible to reapply for this particular variance with a stronger evidence of maybe 7 people sitting?
You've taken action today. I guess I would defer to Matt on whether you could rehear the request.
Or reapply.
Or reapply. The reapplication process is kind of long. It takes staff 45 days to get something from an application in front of you. And there's a lot of staff review, and there's a fee involved in that. I don't know whether having the additional 2 members would make the difference in the vote. It is possible for someone who was in the majority to request a reconsideration of an item under Robert's Rules of Order, and that means one of you who voted no would have to make that recommendation. And it is a motion and action, so if you made the motion, it would go on next agenda, Matt, for them to vote on?
Yeah.
Consideration?
If somebody from the side that voted no, the 3, wants to do a reconsideration, what we would have to do is agendize it for the next meeting. There will be a motion for reconsideration that would require a second to even reconsider it, and then a vote in an affirmative to reconsider the matter. Robert's Rules of Order tends to be in conflict with the open meeting law a lot of times, so that's how we typically do those. It would be allowed. And then Tammy and or George or Chelsea, do you know if there's a waiting period after a denial if someone wants to actually reapply?
For variances, I believe there is a waiting
it's usually
period.
180 days.
Yes,
but
I believe it's
for
6
the
months.
same variance.
For the same variance.
Right.
But that would apply for a reapplication and not a reconsideration should you go
Right.
that
So
route.
I suppose there are 2 options, right? They can reapply and do it, or if somebody in the no vote camp wants to reconsider it, it can be put on to the next agenda, and then it would require a second to even reconsider it, and an affirmative vote, and then at that point we got to take a look at it.
And that would be a request to staff. We would agendize it for you to reconsider and take action on at a future meeting.
This is Mary Frederickson. I am not looking to have it reconsidered. I was one of the no's. And I'll just say this for the applicant, and that I understand your frustration. But it is not a matter of 3 no's against the wishes or the expressed opinions of your neighbors, but your request versus the code that has been adopted by the citywide. So I understand your frustration, but for my no vote, I don't see your concerns being impacted significantly by the difference between a 4-foot fence and a 6-foot fence. The noise goes where the noise goes, and that extra 2 feet, I don't think has much. I'm no scientist, but I can't imagine that that would have much of a difference if you brought that fence down to 4 foot, and the same for the potential for people going through your yard. I appreciate the fact that at your height, you could probably scale a 4-foot fence. But I think most people, when confronted with a 4-foot fence, if they were running through your elderly neighbor's yard, would choose instead just to run around the end of your 4-foot fence as opposed to hopping it. Anyway, I just want to let you know my thought processes on my no vote.
I appreciate it. The example we said that happened 3 weeks ago, the gentleman that hopped the 4-foot fence in our neighbor's yard didn't go around. He hopped it, and he was stopped by our 6-foot fence. It blows my mind that we haven't heard one nay all day long, and this is the one that gets denied today. There's something more to this. And, as George noted, our neighbors across the street have a 6-foot fence in the front setback as well, both sides of their property, not even the one just adjacent to Whipple. Are we going to go through, and that fence has probably been there for
10 years.
I'd say at least that.
We looked at aerial photos.
I'd say at least that. It's about falling down. It's been there for so long. Are we going to go through and start changing everyone's property and making everyone cut their fences down when, we're just asking for 2 more feet? I know you said it's no different. I don't know how tall you are, but I'm 6'2". A 4-foot fence does me no good. A 6-foot fence does block that road from me. And that's the difference between a 4 and a 6-foot fence when you're an individual that is 6 feet tall. We're not asking for a 15-foot tall block wall here. We're asking for 2 feet difference on a cute white picket fence in this nice little neighborhood here in the town of Prescott. We don't feel like we're asking for very much. The fact that we got any no's tells me that there's something more to this.
Well, I'm sorry you feel that way. I don't know what more there could be. I mean, we just have to take the zoning as we see it and vote our conscience. I don't.
The city of
there's
Prescott.
no nefarious action going on here.
I sure hope not, but it sure seems that way when you guys are approving 3-story tall storage facilities with no issues. And then my cute white picket fence at 6 feet tall gets denied. This has been an ongoing process for a year and a half at least. And I know that we've irritated a lot of the people at the city of Prescott because we didn't ask them permission. We just decided to put a 6-foot privacy fence on our own property. And like I said, I just hope that it's not coming back as a spiteful decision here by you guys instead of a reasonable decision compared to the rest of the decisions that you guys approved today.
Well, I can assure you it is not, and I think I speak for all the members here.
Yeah.
I didn't even know about this to us on our computers.
You're the one that approved it, though. We should be asking the rest of them.
Well, but that was my vote. I'm one vote.
I know.
I still respect their vote.
You even had to second it.
Pardon me?
You even had to second it.
That's correct.
Which I appreciate. But there is this. Unfortunately, this will have to keep going. This is our home, you guys, and we need a little bit more privacy than 4 feet. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I think 2 things, Mr. Chairman, and the applicant is that one of the reasons I asked George the question is to know that your options are going in the future. But the second thing is we have plenty of hearings. Last 3 years I've been on the Board of Adjustments. I voted no on a number of issues. So I'm a little bit concerned about your comments. It's unfair. This is a reasonable board. We all have reasonable reactions to the request. So,
One more thing, if I could add. We didn't have one person that this fence affects say no. You know, you guys approve a helicopter pad in Diamond Valley that we had a lot of people say no. It doesn't make any sense.
Different circumstances for different requests. So first of all, you're wrong. They did not approve a 3-story building today. That was not before them.
They approved a helicopter pad not too long ago in Diamond Valley.
They did.
Where there was multiple neighbors saying no, and we don't have a single
That's fine.
case of a neighbor saying no.
Again, circumstances differ from one property to another.
Okay. We'll keep it going. Thank you, guys.
Do we have any staff updates?
Don't believe we have any. We have a staff update. It's probably related to the general plan.
I could, but I wasn't actually to the general plan. But if you are interested, it is going to be heard by the city council at their next meeting on the 25th. Be the first meeting with the city council. That wasn't it. Actually, we do have a meeting next month, March 20th, just so you knew. But we do not have a meeting in April. They are moving the council chambers down to the first floor. And so we have a month and a little over a month that we will not have any meetings. So the only Board of Adjustment meeting that's affected by that is the one in April. So we will not have a meeting in April, just so if you want to plan a vacation or something. Except for, well, you two too, because we have no P&Z meetings either, so. That was all I had.
Tammy, does that apply to planning and zoning also?
All meetings.
Well, with nothing further, this meeting is adjourned.